The final bell of the day was usually a relief, a chaotic symphony of slamming lockers and scuffing sneakers that signaled freedom. For Sarah Vance, it was just a shift in surveillance. Standing at the front of her classroom, wiping the timeline of the Cold War from the whiteboard, she watched the students file out. She noticed the details others missed: the bruised knuckle on the linebacker, the nervous tick of the debate captain, the terrified silence of Maya Lynn. Maya lingered. She was a ghost of a girl, always sitting in the back row, blending into the beige cinder blocks. Today, she stood by Sarah's desk, her fingers twisting the strap of her backpack until her knuckles turned white. "Miss Vance?" Maya's voice was barely audible over the hallway noise. Sarah stopped erasing. She didn't smile, she rarely did, but she gave the girl her full attention. "What is it, Maya?" Maya stepped closer, her eyes darting toward the open door as if expecting an ambush. "I need to tell someone. I think something is wrong." "Is this about the essay?" "No," Maya whispered, leaning over the desk. "It's my dad. He told me not to say anything, but I'm scared. He says he works here." Sarah frowned. She knew the staff roster backward and forward. "Your father isn't on the faculty, Maya." "I know," Maya breathed, her voice trembling. "He says he works secretly at this school, inside the walls." Before Sarah could press for clarification, a group of loud seniors crashed into the room, laughing. The spell broke. Maya flinched, terrified, and bolted. "Maya, wait!" Sarah called out, but the girl had already dissolved into the crowded corridor. Sarah felt a prickle at the base of her neck, an old instinct dormant since her days in intelligence, flaring to life. She moved to the doorway, scanning the sea of heads. She saw Maya turn the corner toward the north wing, near the science labs. 30 minutes later, the school was nearly empty. Sarah walked to the parking lot, expecting to see Maya waiting for the bus. She wasn't there. Sarah checked the detention list. Empty. She checked the library. Empty. A cold knot tightened in Sarah's stomach. She walked back inside, heading for Maya's locker. It was slightly ajar. Inside, the books were gone, but Maya's phone sat on the metal shelf, buzzing with an incoming text from Mom. Maya hadn't left, she had been taken, and it had happened in the 20 minutes between the classroom and the exit. Sarah picked up the phone, her face hardening into a mask of cold determination. The teacher was gone. The operative was back. Principal Miller was a man more concerned with liability lawsuits than student safety. He sat behind his mahogany desk, waving a dismissive hand at Sarah. The late afternoon sun cut through the blinds, casting prison bar shadows across his face. "Sarah, please," Miller sighed, checking his watch. "Teenagers run off. She probably skipped the bus to hang out with a boyfriend. Leaving her phone behind is just teenage drama, a cry for attention." "Maya Lynn doesn't have a boyfriend, and she has perfect attendance," Sarah said, her voice level but carrying a weight that made Miller pause. "She told me her father works secretly at this school. Does that mean anything to you?" Miller blinked, a micro-expression of genuine confusion crossing his face, followed quickly by annoyance. "We don't have secret employees, Sarah. We have a janitorial staff, teachers, and admin. That's it. Stop reading spy novels." Sarah didn't argue. She stood up. "If she isn't home by 6, I'm calling the police." "You do that," Miller muttered, already looking at his email. Sarah walked out, her heels clicking rhythmically against the linoleum. She knew the police would take 24 hours to file a missing person report for a teenager. Maya didn't have 24 hours. She headed straight for the server room in the basement. The door was locked, secured by a keypad. To the average history teacher, it was a minor inconvenience. Sarah pulled a slender multi-tool from her purse, bypassing the electronic strike plate in under 10 seconds. Inside, the hum of cooling fans was deafening. Sarah sat at the terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She wasn't guessing passwords, she was injecting a script she kept on a USB drive for emergencies. The screen flickered, and the school's security camera feed popped up. She rewound the footage to 3:05 p.m. Camera 4, North Wing hallway. She saw Maya walking fast, clutching her bag. Suddenly, a side door, labeled Custodial Supply, opened. A hand reached out, a gloved hand, and yanked Maya into the darkness. The door slammed. The hallway remained empty. She froze the frame. The grab was professional, no struggle, no scream time. But the person who took her was wearing a distinctive gray jumpsuit. She zoomed in on the wrist of the attacker. A tattoo. A simple geometric shape, a triangle bisected by a line. It wasn't a gang sign. It was a structural engineering symbol for a load-bearing wall. Sarah leaned back. Maya's father claimed he worked inside the walls. Someone else was ensuring he and his daughter stayed there. The custodial closet from the video was empty, smelling faintly of bleach and something metallic, copper, perhaps blood. Sarah swept the small room with a tactical flashlight she kept in her car. The floor was clean, too clean. It had been mopped recently. She needed to understand the geography. The school, Oak Creek High, was built in the 70s, but there had been a massive renovation 4 years ago, funded by a private grant. Sarah broke into the library archives. The librarian, Mrs. Holloway, had gone home hours ago. The physical files were kept in the back. Sarah flipped through the construction permits. The renovation wasn't done by the city. It was contracted to Vanguard Foundations. She pulled the blueprints. They looked standard until she overlaid the original 1970s layout with the 2020 renovation plans. There were discrepancies, huge ones. Between the boiler room and the gymnasium, the new plans showed a solid concrete foundation, but the old plans showed a sub-basement storage area. The renovation hadn't filled it in, they had walled it off. "You won't find what you're looking for in the papers, Ms. Vance." Sarah spun around, dropping into a defensive stance. Standing in the doorway was Mr. Henderson, the head of maintenance. He was a large man, usually jovial, but now his face was grave. He held a heavy wrench in his hand, tapping it against his thigh. "Mr. Henderson," Sarah said, her voice calm, calculating the distance between them. "You work late." "Pipes don't fix themselves," he said, stepping into the room. "You're looking for the girl." "I saw the footage, Gary. Someone pulled her into the maintenance closet. Was it you?" Gary Henderson let out a dry, humorless laugh. "If it was me, you wouldn't be looking at blueprints. You'd be in a barrel." He tossed the wrench onto a table. It landed with a heavy clatter. "I didn't take her, but I know who did, and I know about the father." "Talk," Sarah commanded, shifting her stance. "The father isn't a worker," Gary said, lowering his voice. "He's the architect, the guy who designed the hidden rooms for the renovation. He tried to back out of the deal with the people funding it. They've been keeping him down there for 3 days to finish the job. They took the girl to make sure he works faster." "Who are they?" asked Sarah, her eyes narrowing. Gary shook his head, looking terrified. "I don't ask, I just keep the AC running and look the other way. But taking a kid, that's too far, even for them." "Show me the entrance," Sarah ordered. Gary hesitated, then nodded. "Follow me, but if we get caught, I'm dead. You're just a teacher, maybe they'll just fire you." Sarah almost smiled. If they caught her, firing would be the least of their worries. They moved through the silent hallways, the shadows stretching long and distorted. They reached the boiler room, the heart of the school's heating system. It was hot, loud, and smelled of oil. Gary walked to a large industrial panel covered with pressure gauges. He gripped a specific pipe that looked rusted into place and twisted it sharply to the left. With a hiss of hydraulics, a section of the concrete wall, disguised behind a rack of tools, swung inward. The keypad code changes daily, but the override is mechanical. The architect built it in as a failsafe. Sarah peered into the darkness beyond. A sleek, modern corridor stretched out, lit by low-level LED strips. It looked more like a CIA black site than a high school basement. "Stay here," Sarah told Gary. "If I'm not back in 20 minutes, pull the fire alarm." "You're going in there alone?" Gary hissed. "There are guards, armed guards." Sarah reached into her blazer and pulled out a makeshift weapon she had assembled from the chemistry lab earlier, a glass jar filled with a volatile mixture of ammonia and concentrated bleach, wrapped in a rag. It wasn't a gun, but in a confined space, it was devastating. "I teach history because I don't love dates, Gary. I teach history so I don't have to repeat it." She slipped into the corridor. The air changed instantly, filtered, sterile, cold. She moved silently, her footsteps absorbed by the rubberized flooring. She heard voices ahead, 2 men. "Finish the encryption by midnight or the girl gets it. He's working. He's crying, but he's working." Sarah pressed herself against the wall. She recognized the voice. It wasn't a random thug. It was the vice principal, Mr. Thorne, the man who always led the morning pledge of allegiance with a smile. Sarah peered around the corner. The corridor opened into a wide observation room separated by bulletproof glass. Inside the glass enclosure, a man, disheveled, bruised, and wearing a torn suit, was typing frantically at a server terminal. That was the architect. In the corner of the enclosure, bound to a chair with zip ties, sat Maya. She was crying silently, a piece of duct tape over her mouth. Outside the glass, Vice Principal Thorne stood with a man in tactical gear. The guard held a submachine gun. This was professional, high stakes. Sarah assessed the situation. Direct assault was suicide. She needed a distraction. She looked at the ventilation system above the guard's head. She uncorked her jar of chemical misery. Holding her breath, she tossed it. It sailed through the air and smashed against the vent intake that fed air into the hallway where Thorne and the guards stood, but not into the sealed glass room where Maya was. The reaction was instant. A cloud of chloramine gas expanded. Thorne coughed, clutching his throat. The guard stumbled, eyes streaming, swinging his weapon blindly. Sarah moved. She didn't run, she flowed. She kicked the guard's knee from behind, shattering the joint. As he fell, she struck him in the throat, silencing his scream. She grabbed his weapon, stripped the magazine, and tossed the gun down the hall. She didn't need to shoot, she just needed them disarmed. Thorne was on his knees, retching. Sarah grabbed him by the hair and slammed his face into the keypad next to the door. "Open it," she snarled. I can't," wheezed Thorne. Biometric." Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed the unconscious guard's hand and pressed his thumb against the scanner. The light turned green. The heavy door hissed open. The air inside the glass room was clean. The architect looked up, eyes wide with terror. Maya saw Sarah and muffled a scream of relief. "Miss Vance?" the architect stammered. "Get away from the terminal," Sarah ordered, slicing Maya's bonds with the multi-tool. Maya collapsed into her arms. "We have to go," Sarah said, scanning the exits. "Now." "I can't," the architect said. "If I don't finish the transfer, the fail-safe triggers. The building, the gas lines, the school will blow." Sarah froze. "They rigged the school?" "To destroy the evidence," he wept. "This isn't just money, it's blackmail data, terabytes of it. Senators, judges, everyone." "You built a data haven under a high school?" Sarah asked, incredulously. She was guiding Maya toward the door, her eyes checking the hallway for reinforcements. "It was supposed to be a secure archive," David, whose name was David, argued. "I didn't know they were going to use it for this. When I found out, I tried to lock them out. That's why they grabbed me." "We can argue ethics later," Sarah snapped. "Disable the bomb." "I need 10 minutes. "You have 2. Sarah shoved David back to the keyboard. She turned to Maya. "Listen to me carefully. You are going to run back to the boiler room. Mr. Henderson is there. Tell him to pull the fire alarm now. Get every student and teacher out of the building for night school activities. Go." "I'm not leaving you," Maya cried. "Maya," Sarah said, her voice dropping to that terrifyingly calm register, "this is my job. You are a student. Do as you are told." Maya nodded, tears spilling over, and sprinted out the door. Sarah turned back to the hallway. The gas had dissipated, but the alarm was silent. Thorn had been gone. He had crawled away while she was freeing Maya. That meant reinforcements were coming. She picked up the guard's dropped submachine gun. She checked the chamber, full. She hated guns in schools. It went against every fiber of her being. But this wasn't a school anymore. It was a battlefield. She dragged a heavy metal desk across the doorway, creating a barricade. "Keep typing, David," Sarah said, positioning herself behind the cover. "Who are you?" David asked, his fingers shaking as he coded. "History teacher," Sarah said, aiming down the sights at the dark corridor. Footsteps, heavy boots, a lot of them. "They're cutting the power," David yelled as the lights flickered and died. The room was plunged into darkness, lit only by the blue glow of the server screens and the red laser sights of the approaching tactical team. "Eyes on the screen, David," Sarah whispered. The first flashbang grenade skittered into the room. The bang was deafening, a white-hot flash that would have blinded anyone unprepared. But Sarah had closed her eyes and covered her ears the second she heard the metal clatter. As the tactical team breached, assuming the occupants were stunned, Sarah opened fire. She didn't shoot to kill, she shot to immobilize. Shoulders, knees, hands. Controlled bursts. 3 men went down in the doorway. The others pulled back, shouting confused orders. They weren't expecting resistance. They were expecting a math teacher and a terrified architect. "Status," Sarah yelled over her shoulder. "I've bypassed the first firewall, but the detonator is on a separate loop. I can't stop it remotely," David screamed. "Where is it physically?" "The main boiler. If the pressure hits critical, the gas main ruptures. The spark from the igniter will take out the whole block." Sarah cursed. The boiler room, where she had just sent Maya. "Stay here and lock the door," Sarah commanded. "If they breach, wipe the drive." "Wipe it? That's my life insurance." "If you don't, you won't have a life to insure." Sarah vaulted over the desk. She didn't go out the door the attackers were using. She shot out the glass partition that looked into the adjoining server cooling room. She scrambled through the shards, dropping into the subfloor crawl space. She crawled fast, ignoring the glass slicing her palms. She knew the layout now. The cooling pipes led back to the main water intake, the boiler room. She emerged through a floor grate, gasping for air. The boiler room was chaos. The fire alarm was finally blaring, a rhythmic, deafening honk. Mr. Henderson was on the floor, unconscious, bleeding from a head wound. Standing by the main pressure valve was Thorn. He held Maya by the hair with one hand and a pistol in the other. "I knew you'd come back," Thorn shouted over the alarm. "Drop the dun, Miss Vance, or the girl dies before the explosion." The pressure gauge on the massive boiler was trembling in the red zone. Steam hissed violently from the joints. Sarah slowly placed the submachine gun on the floor and kicked it away. She raised her hands. "Let her go, Thorn. You've lost. The police are on their way. The fire department is minutes out." "The police are on the payroll," Thorn spat, "and the fire department will just find a crater. I'm walking out of here. You and the girl are the tragic casualties of a gas leak." "You're a vice principal," Sarah said, inching closer. "You coordinate bake sales. You don't have the stomach for this." "I coordinate $100 million in laundered cartel assets," Thorn yelled, pressing the gun harder against Maya's temple. "I built this operation." Sarah looked at Maya. The girl was terrified, but she was watching Sarah. Sarah made a tiny motion with her eyes, down and left. Maya understood. She stomped as hard as she could on Thorn's instep. Thorn howled in pain and loosened his grip for a fraction of a second. That was all Sarah needed. She didn't rush him. She grabbed a steam pipe release valve next to her head and yanked it down. A jet of superheated steam blasted directly between Sarah and Thorn, creating a blinding white wall. Thorn fired blindly through the steam. Bang, bang!
Sarah ducked under the jet, sliding across the oil-slicked floor. She swept Thorne's legs out from under him. He hit the concrete hard. The gun skittered away. Sarah was on top of him instantly. This wasn't a fight, it was a dismantling. She broke his nose with her palm, then applied a sleeper hold. Thorne thrashed, choking, until he went limp. Sarah shoved him aside and scrambled to the boiler controls. The needle was buried in the red. The metal was groaning. "It's jammed! The pressure release is jammed!" Maya was by her side. "The manual override! Dad showed me. It's the wheel on the top." They both grabbed the scorching hot iron wheel. Together, 1, 2, 3, turn! They heaved. The wheel screeched, rusted and stubborn. Then, with a shudder that shook the floor, it gave way. A massive plume of steam erupted from the roof vent. The pressure gauge began to drop. The explosion was averted. The flashing lights outside were blinding. Ambulances, fire trucks, and police cruisers filled the parking lot. But these weren't the local cops Thorne claimed to own. These were black SUVs. Federal. Sarah sat on the back of an ambulance, a thermal blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Maya sat next to her, clutching a cup of hot cocoa, her father David sitting on her other side, holding her hand as if he'd never let go. A man in a sharp suit approached them. Agent Miller, no relation to the principal. Sarah knew him. "You made a mess, Vance," the agent said quietly. "I cleaned one up," Sarah corrected, sipping water. "Thorne is in custody. The drive is secured. The architect is ready to turn state's witness." "We had an operation in place, Sarah. We were watching Thorne for months. You blew our cover." "You were watching while a student was kidnapped," Sarah said, her voice icy. "I graded the assignment. You failed." The agent sighed. "We can't have a history teacher taking down a cartel laundering hub. The press would have a field day. We need a cover story." "Gas leak," Sarah said tiredly. "Heroic janitor Mr. Henderson found the leak. I helped evacuate. Thorne died in the confusion." "Thorne is alive, in a coma thanks to you." "Then he suffered smoke inhalation." Maya looked up. "What about me? What about my dad?" The agent looked at David. "Witness protection, new identities, relocation. Tonight." Maya's face fell. She looked at Sarah. "I have to leave?" Sarah nodded, a rare, genuine sadness in her eyes. "It's the only way to be safe, Maya. You're brave. You'll be okay." Maya hugged Sarah tight. "Thank you. I knew you weren't just a teacher. You're like a superhero." "I'm just a teacher. I just used to have a different syllabus." As the SUVs took Maya and David away, Sarah stood up. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only exhaustion. She needed sleep. She needed to grade the essays on the Cold War. 2 weeks later, Oak Creek High was back to normal. The gas leak repairs were finished. Thorne was hospitalized with severe illness and had resigned. Principal Miller was sweating through an audit by the school board, totally unaware of the bunker beneath his feet that the feds had quietly sealed with concrete. Sarah stood at the front of the class. The desk where Maya used to sit was empty. "All right, everyone," Sarah said, her voice projecting to the back of the room. "Open your textbooks to page 142, The Fall of the Berlin Wall." The class groaned, a comforting normal sound. A new student walked in, a boy, looking arrogant, wearing a leather jacket that cost more than Sarah's car. He handed a slip to Sarah. "He's new," he said, smirking. "My dad just donated the new gym wing, so go easy on me." Sarah looked at the slip. Then she looked at the boy. She noticed his watch on his wrist. It wasn't just expensive. It was a prototype, a specific tracking device used by foreign dignitaries for their children. She looked at his file. Father, Alexei Volkov. Sarah felt that familiar prickle on her neck. Volkov, an arms dealer she had tracked across Istanbul 5 years ago. He was here, in her town, using the school to legitimize his money, just like the last group.
The school wasn't just a school. It was a magnet for the corrupt, a playground for the people she used to hunt. Sarah handed the slip back to the boy. She smiled, and for the first time the class went silent. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a predator's smile. "Take a seat, Mr. Volkov, front row. I have a feeling I'm going to need to keep a very close eye on you." She turned to the board and picked up the marker. The nightmare was over, but the lesson plan, it was just beginning. She wrote on the board in large, bold letters, "History always repeats itself." "Let's begin."